This happened back in 2006 when I was 13, living in a quiet, upscale suburb where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. My dad, a corporate accountant, had to swing by his office one evening to pick up some financial reports for an urgent meeting the next day. It was around 8 p.m, and since my mum was out of town, he dragged me along. I was sprawled in the back seat of our SUV, engrossed in a sci-fi novel, barely paying attention to the world around me. What happened that night, though, is something I buried deep until a random trigger brought it roaring back years later. The memory resurfaced last year while I was binge-watching a crime drama. There was a scene maybe 5 minutes into the episode where a character is cornered in a dimly lit parking garage, and the tension of someone lurking just out of sight hit me like a freight train. My chest tightened, my palms got sweaty, and I had to pause the show. I'm no stranger to thrillers. I've watched plenty of gruesome scenes without blinking. But this felt personal, like my body was remembering something my brain had locked away. After days of obsessing, the memory clicked into place, and I realized why. Let's go back to 2006. We pulled into the parking garage of my dad's office building, a multi-level concrete structure that was mostly empty at that hour. I vaguely noticed my dad hesitating before turning off the engine. He sat there, staring out the windshield, which was weird because he's usually all business, get in, get out. I looked up from my book and asked, "What's up?" He didn't answer right away, just kept his eyes on the rearview mirror. Finally, he said, "There's a guy over there, sitting in his car. He's been watching us since we pulled in." I glanced back and saw a dark sedan parked a few spaces away, its engine running and headlights off. The guy inside was just a shadow, but I could feel his gaze. It wasn't anything obvious, no flashing lights or creepy gestures, but something about it made my skin prickle. My dad, who's not paranoid by any stretch, said, "Let's wait a minute." So we did. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The guy didn't move, neither did we. Eventually, my dad said, "Okay, let's make this quick. Stay close." I shoved my book in my backpack and we got out. The garage was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet where every footstep echoes like a gunshot. As we walked toward the entrance, I heard a car door slam behind us. I turned, and there was the guy, walking in our direction, hands in his jacket pockets. He was tall, maybe in his 30s, wearing a hoodie that hid most of his face. My dad grabbed my arm and picked up the pace, muttering, "Keep moving." The building had a keycard entry, so we swiped in and headed for the elevators. I thought we were safe once we were inside. Random strangers don't just have keycards, right? But as the glass doors closed behind us, I saw him swipe in too, just seconds later. My dad noticed it too, because his grip on my arm tightened. The lobby was small, with 2 elevators and a stairwell off to the right. We pressed the elevator button, but it was taking forever. My dad kept glancing at the guy, who was now standing a few feet away, staring at the floor but inching closer. When the elevator finally dinged, the guy stepped in first and held the door open, gesturing for us to join him. He gave a tight smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and said,
"Going up?"
My dad, quick on his feet, pulled out his phone and pretended to answer a call. "Yeah, hang on," he said to no one, then turned to me and said, "We'll catch the next one, kid." He waved the guy off politely, and the doors closed. I knew he wasn't on a call. His phone screen was dark. The second the elevator left, my dad pressed the button for the next one and whispered,
"That was the guy from the car. He followed us here. We're not getting in with him."
My heart started racing, but I nodded and stayed quiet. When the next elevator arrived, we bolted inside, hit the button for the 5th floor, his office was on the 4th, and rode up in silence. My dad's office was right by the elevator bank, so we ran in, locked the door, and waited. He didn't say much, just listened at the door for any sounds. After what felt like forever, probably 10 minutes, he said, "We're taking the stairs down." We crept out, checked the hallway, and booked it to the stairwell. It was a cold, echoey concrete shaft, and we practically flew down the steps, not stopping until we were back in the car. We peeled out of the garage and didn't talk about it on the drive home. I was shaken but figured it was just a weird night. My dad didn't bring it up again, and I didn't ask. Kids forget things, or maybe I just didn't want to dwell on it. Years later, when I was in college, I asked my dad about that night. His face went pale, and he told me the rest of the story. The guy in the garage? He was a disgruntled former employee who'd been fired a week earlier for threatening a co-worker. That night, he'd come back to the building with a knife in his pocket, waiting for his former boss, who was working late. The boss had left through a different exit just minutes before we arrived, which is probably why the guy fixated on us instead. Security footage later showed him pacing the garage, then following us inside. After we dodged the elevator, he rode up to the 6th floor, where he trashed an office and stabbed a computer monitor before security tackled him. He was arrested, and the knife was found in his jacket. The police report said he was high on something amphetamines, they thought, and completely unhinged. What haunts me is how close we came. If my dad hadn't trusted his gut, if we'd gotten in that elevator, who knows what could have happened. The guy was clearly unstable, and we were just collateral in his path. My dad's quick thinking, faking that call, taking the stairs, probably saved us from being stuck in a metal box with a guy ready to snap. I've learned to trust my instincts since then, to notice the little things, like a car idling too long or a smile that feels wrong. Politeness be damned. I think about that night a lot now, especially when I'm in a parking garage or waiting for an elevator. The what-ifs creep in. What if we'd gotten in? What if he'd followed us to the 4th floor? I'm just grateful my dad's intuition kicked in. We never saw the guy again, and I hope we never do. When I was 8, arcades were my entire world. The flashing lights, the electronic chirps of the machines, the faint smell of cotton candy. It was like stepping into a dream. Every summer, my family rented a beach house, and the nearby arcade was my first stop. I'd hoard my allowance just to pour it into tokens. This story is about one of those visits, a day that started with joy but ended with me trembling in fear. I'm 16 now, and I still avoid elevators in crowded places. We'd just settled into our beach rental, and I begged my mum to let me hit the arcade a block away. It was in a big, multi-story entertainment complex with shops and a food court, and the arcade was on the 3rd floor. She gave me a $10 bill, told me to stay in the arcade, and said to be back before dark. I was out the door in seconds, my sneakers slapping the pavement as I ran toward the neon-lit building. The arcade was as awesome as I remembered, claw machines blinking, racing games blaring, kids shouting over air hockey. I swapped my cash for a cup of tokens and jumped from game to game, racking up tickets. I was lost in skee-ball when I noticed a man by the entrance. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up, and he seemed to be watching me. His stare wasn't casual, it was sharp, like he was studying me. My stomach twisted, but I told myself he was just some guy waiting for someone. I moved to a pinball machine in the corner, trying to shake the feeling. But when I glanced up, he was closer, standing near a claw machine, still staring. My hands shook on the flippers. The arcade was packed with kids, teens, and parents everywhere, so why was he focused on me? I was just a short, scrawny kid, barely tall enough to reach the controls. I decided to leave, thinking I'd head back to the rental. The arcade was on the 3rd floor, so I made my way to the elevator near the back. My heart was already racing as I pressed the button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside, relieved to be getting away until he stepped in right behind me. It was just the two of us. The doors slid shut, and the air felt thick, like I couldn't breathe right. He stood in the corner, silent, his hood casting a shadow over his face. I stared at the floor numbers, willing them to move faster. Then he moved closer, not a lot, just a step, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. I pressed myself against the wall, my tokens clinking in my pocket. He said,
Where are you headed, kid?
His voice was low and rough. My heart slammed against my chest. I didn't answer, just kept my eyes on the floor indicator. The elevator felt like it was moving in slow motion. I glanced at him, and he was staring right at me, his eyes glinting under the hood. When the doors finally opened on the ground floor, I bolted. I didn't care about the tokens spilling from my pocket. I just ran, weaving through the food court, out the main doors, and all the way back to our rental. I pounded on the door, shaking so hard I could barely stand. My mum opened the door, and I collapsed into her arms, gasping as I said to her, "Someone followed me in the elevator." I tried to describe him, the hoodie, the voice, but it was all a blur. My parents went back to the complex with me, but the man was gone. The security guard said they'd check the cameras, but nothing came of it. My mom said maybe I'd misread the situation, that crowded places can make you jumpy. But I know what I felt. That elevator ride, his voice, his stare, it was real. Even now, I can't step into an elevator without checking who's inside. This happened about 10 years ago, when I was around 8 years old, living in a bustling city in Japan. Like many East Asian cities, space was tight, so most people lived in towering apartment blocks. Elevators were a fact of life, unavoidable, really. I'd heard whispers about elevator incidents, the kind of hushed stories parents share when they think kids aren't listening. But at that age, I didn't pay much attention to those warnings. It was a muggy afternoon, probably around 3:30 p.m, after I'd finished a long day at school. I was exhausted from extra math tutoring typical for kids in my neighborhood. My family lived in a 12-story apartment building, and I trudged through the lobby, my heavy backpack slung over one shoulder, ready to collapse in my room on the 7th floor. I pressed the elevator button and waited, the familiar hum of the building's machinery buzzing in the background. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open. A man was already inside, standing in the corner. He was dressed oddly for the warm weather. A dark hoodie pulled low over his face, a baseball cap casting shadows over his eyes, and a cloth mask covering the lower half of his face. It wasn't unusual to see masks, lots of people wore them, but something about his vibe felt off. He didn't look at me, just stared at the floor, hands shoved deep into his pockets. I stepped in and pressed the button for the 7th floor. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him lean forward and press the button for the 15th floor, the top of the building. The doors closed, and the elevator lurched upward. It was just the two of us, and the silence felt heavy, like the air was thicker than usual. I gripped the strap of my backpack, trying to focus on the glowing numbers above the door. When the elevator reached the 7th floor, the doors opened with a soft chime. I started to step out, but something tugged at my backpack, hard. I stumbled backward, confused, and turned to see the man's hand wrapped around one of the straps. His grip was tight, and he wasn't letting go. My heart skipped a beat as the doors began to close again. Panicking, I jabbed the open button repeatedly, and the doors shuddered back open. "Let go," I said, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. I yanked at my bag, but his hand didn't budge. His face was still half hidden, but I could see his eyes now cold and unblinking, locked onto me. I didn't understand what was happening, but my stomach twisted with a bad feeling. Before I could process it, he did something that still haunts me. He grabbed me by the waist, hoisting me off the ground like I weighed nothing. My feet dangled, my sneakers kicking uselessly in the air. It was like a scene from a nightmare. 1 second I was standing, the next I was helpless, my backpack dangling from my shoulders. My mind raced. This guy's trying to take me somewhere. I started thrashing, swinging my fists and yelling at the top of my lungs. I don't even remember what I said, just pure, panicked noise. Maybe my screaming startled him, or maybe he realized someone might hear. Whatever the reason, he suddenly dropped me. I hit the elevator floor hard, my knees buckling, but I didn't care. The doors were still open, and I scrambled out, sprinting down the hallway toward my apartment. I didn't look back, but I could hear the elevator doors finally close behind me. I burst through my front door, gasping, and told my parents everything. My mum's face went pale, but for some reason, we didn't call the police. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe we thought it wasn't serious enough since I got away. Looking back, I kick myself for not pushing harder to report it. That guy could have been dangerous, and who knows what he was planning. For months after, I refused to take the elevator alone. I'd trudge up 7 flights of stairs, even though my legs burned and I was late for dinner half the time. My parents thought I was being dramatic, but I didn't care. The memory of that man's grip on my backpack, the way he lifted me like I was nothing, it stuck with me. Even now, every time I step into an elevator, I check the corners, just in case.